I'm Christine Santos, ex-corporate woman turned founder of my own boutique podcast production company. And it wasn't that long ago that I lacked the knowledge, the time, and the community to focus on growing my small but fun and exciting business. Through it all, I've had many challenges and failures and lessons learned. Today, I have so much fun helping others change lives and having the time and choices that allows me to spend more time with my family. It wasn't too long ago that this was just a someday dream. I created the Wonder Boldly podcast to give you inspiration with actionable steps to help you go after your someday dream now. If you're ready to take your days, weeks, months, life back into your own hands, or you're just curious what it means to create a business that makes an impact in a life you love, you are in the right place. Let's go. Hello and welcome to another episode of Wonder Boldly. Today I have with me Mitzi Campbell, who, first of all, is so inspiring. If you're not following her, follow her on Instagram. She is just this amazing, I'm going to say really genuine person. I've known her online for a little bit, and then we met in person at a recent event, and she just has this essence about her that is really warm and welcoming. And I'm going to say, and not to make you feel uncomfortable, but she is super smart and so inspiring. And she just exudes it all, but not in a way that you feel like you can't approach her or anything like that. She is so warm and welcoming, even to the point where she has family closer to me, and she was in the area. And I said, "Oh my gosh, you're in the area. We should get together." And she was so kind and invited me to something that she was attending for her daughter. And I wasn't available, which was such a bummer. But that is just the type of person she is. She loves human beings. She loves telling stories about other humans just like us. She has this amazing podcast called Blessons, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. Before I get to that, I want to finish and say, Mitzi, she's a mentor, a teacher, podcaster, interviewer, speaker, and writer. So much more. She knits, she does yoga, she's a mom of 3. She just is so inspiring. And I just am so really grateful that I've gotten to know her. And she inspires me every day. I follow her on Instagram. I listen to her podcast. And so with that being said, I want to tell you a little bit about her podcast. You guys know I'm all about podcasting. And she just has this amazing podcast where I'm going to say that she had on somebody who is really big in the industry. And to today's episode that I listened to before we got together, I try to listen to all the episodes. I probably don't, but that's great because sometimes I find I'm driving in the car and I'm like, what episode am I going to listen to? Are there some that I haven't listened to? And then if there are, that's always a blessing because I'm like, oh, good, there's something new to listen to. But today she had on Kylie, this young girl who is, I think, about 17, just talking about her perspective as a 17-year-old. And it was very interesting. If you haven't listened to it, go ahead and listen to it. It's really fun and interesting. And it just really spoke to what Mitzi is all about. And how I put that sort of in a package is about getting to know other human beings. Yes, we're different. Yes, we all have different experiences and learning from each other. So I just want to read to you a little bit of her description of her podcast show, Blessons. Here it is. These are the lessons and blessings of life told by people just like you in their own voices. Life is a school and we are all here to learn. This is how transformation happens. What are blessings? Blessings are the results of our unique and collective life experiences. They are blessings in the lessons we use to learn about ourselves and others to access our desires. I just love that because that is really speaks to my core and how I feel like we all can learn so much from each other. She continues to say, tune into love, laugh, cry, roll your eyes, and have aha moments and get to know your fellow humans so that you see them and yourself a bit more clearly. I just love that. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much, Mitzi, for being with me here today. And I'm just so honored to have you on the show.
Wow, Christine, I'm speechless. That was wonderful. You certainly made me feel pretty spectacular this morning, and that's a beautiful way to start the day. So thank you for having that experience prepared for me today. I wasn't expecting it, and I appreciate you very much. I'm super grateful that we met, and I'm happy to be
Yes.
here on your show.
I know it's so fun and exciting. And yeah, and I just want to pause to say that I truly think you are spectacular. When we met in person, I was just so touched. And I said to her, because you know me, I always say this on my shows, like I'm very bold or assertive, whatever you want to call it. And I'm like, Mitzi, I have to have you on the show. I'm not shy about asking. And she
Oh,
was so
no.
gracious to come
And
on
I
the
loved
show.
that. I
Yeah.
loved that.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
it's
much.
my pleasure.
So let's talk. I want my audience to just really sit and listen all about Mitzi. So the thing that inspires me about you is that you were a professor. And that just really resonates with me because my mom she wasn't a professor. She worked in actually the college that I went to as a secretary in one of the communications departments. And so I've been surrounded by that earlier on, not so much anymore, but earlier on going to the office, seeing the professors, and I personally really enjoyed that.
I loved being a professor. And I heard something just yesterday. I had been referring to myself as a former professor because I'm not doing that right now. But I feel like I haven't really left that life behind completely. And someone yesterday used the term previous. So I'm going to refer to myself as a previous professor from now on. Not to say that I couldn't go back into that life again. I really loved working with that age, young adults who are in their early 20s or late teens. I found that very inspirational. And I also loved the intellectual challenge of being a professor, being in the world of academia and surrounded by others who are working, speaking, interacting at a high level intellectually was very stimulating to me. I loved that. And bringing that across to students, showing them that the transition between high school and real life involves a different level of thinking, a different kind of thinking, a more open mind, exposure to other perspectives. And so I think those are the things I enjoyed most as a professor. And I went through a period where I knew that I needed more. I wanted more. I wanted to break free of the four walls of the classroom and get into teaching in a wider audience. And so that's what kind of inspired me, along with a lot of other things. My episode 100 kind of tells the story of how I made that big pivot. And it was like other things. There were emotional things that were involved as well. But my work as a professor has sustained my intellectual curiosity and my connection to a generation of people who will be the leaders of tomorrow. And I just am super grateful for that having been a part of my life. And I feel like it's shaped me. It's set the foundation for everything I'm doing now. Plus, it's
Yeah.
fun when people call you professor.
Exactly.
Who doesn't want to be called professor? Come on.
Exactly.
Great.
I'm with you. I love it. So that leads us into the question, what have you learned about yourself since you pivoted from academia into entrepreneurship?
I think that for me, the biggest lesson that I learned and I continue to learn is that I really don't know anything, that I have so much more to learn. I thought that I was a very worldly person. I thought that I had a very open mind, and I do. But when I made the switch from academia into entrepreneurship and podcasting and building a different kind of business, I learned that there's so much out there, so much beyond what I could have imagined was out there. And when you shift worlds like that, it's not just a different paradigm, it's a different place. It's a whole different terrain. And so just always having an eye to that kind of beginner's mindset, I'm here to learn. I'm a teacher, but I'm also a student always. And so I just felt like that was something that was even more strongly presented to me when I changed my career in that way, that I just have so much to learn. And it's so exciting. I learned that I love learning. I learned that it's exciting to do new things and to learn new things and to see that there's just this infinite world out there. There's so much to experience. And when you embark on that kind of a intentional transformation, it really brings you into a place in terms of your own self-awareness that is deeper, maybe even shocking in a way, that you realize that there are things about yourself even that you don't even know. And you have to continue to learn those things. And so for me, the biggest realization in learning was about the idea that learning is exciting. I have a lot of learning to do. It's ongoing. It just never ends. And that it's probably the most fun part of your journey as a human being if you learn to embrace the learning, because the rewards of learning things about yourself and the world, taking your experiences as these lessons, these stepping stones on this journey in this, like I said, school of life. In my podcast description, I really do believe it's a school. And yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, is just like having that put into my face more strongly, like, this really, you were right. You really are here to learn, and here's more. And you can keep going.
Yeah, we're very similar in that way. I will share also that I come from corporate, so in upper management in corporate. And when I first started exploring self-development, I'll call it, at the time, I was really surprised, I'll be honest, how naive I was,
Mm,
because I had been in corporate for maybe at that time 25 years. As I exited corporate, it was more like 30 years. And that's all speaking for myself, like corporate world, you climb the corporate ladder, you get the promotions, you get to a certain level. And that was all great. I had learned so many things, how to manage people, projects, all the things, all very good, customers and things like that. And I had no idea what else was out there, but didn't know that I had no idea until you
exactly.
start. Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
That's the thing. And that's why it's so important to expose yourself to other experiences, that maybe things that you wouldn't normally do, or other people who maybe have a different perspective on things than you do. That's why I love talking to people on the show who are different from me. Everyone's different from me, but yet they're the same. I can
Mm-hmm.
always find a commonality, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting. I just find life interesting. I find making change to be interesting. And when you can think of change, whether you're doing it intentionally or whether it's happening in your life in a way that you're not expecting, if you can embrace that feeling of excitement, because anxiety and excitement are the same frequency. And so if you can switch that anxiety, if you feel a little nervousness about something, switch it over to excitement and just get that like energy about life.
Yeah, definitely. And I like how you say that, switch it, because it is the same frequency. And sometimes we need to take baby steps, sure. But switching that over to excitement and embracing change. I think when we embrace change, that we learn so much.
Yep.
When we try something totally new. When I first started on my journey, I did the book, The Artist's Way,
Yes.
and the artist states and the writing pages and all the things, because I was very ensconced. I was so corporate. I still have that persona a little bit, for sure. It hasn't been that long. And really embracing that. And it brought me back to, and I'd like to ask you this as well, it brought me back to remembering things from my childhood. I think we
Hmm.
get so busy in being busy. And in my case, it was corporate. In your case, it was professor. But whatever it is, just doing the thing, being busy, you can forget the feelings that you had when you were a child. And again, it's one of those things where you're not even thinking about it. I'm not like, oh, I forgot the feelings, until you experience, not to be cliche, but now that I'm saying it out loud, it's like an awakening. Oh, I forgot that about myself. Oh, isn't
Hmm.
that interesting? Did
Yeah.
you find any of that when you stepped away from academia?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's been many times in my life when I have remembered something about myself that I loved, that I had tucked away for one reason or another. And I can just think of a quick example of this because it's something maybe that's happened to you or one of your listeners. I can remember a period of time when I forgot what it felt like to put on a great song and just sing along to it at the top of my lungs. And that's something we do as children. It's something we do when we're teenagers and whatnot. And even, gosh, I've done it a million times as an adult too. But when I get into the mode of working, or if I get into a stressful period, either one of those things, I'm just head down trying to either work, build, heal, grow, so focused on that I got to the point one time where I realized, wow, you haven't been singing along to any of your favorite songs lately. You haven't even been listening to music. And I don't know why it came over me. And so I make a point to do that, to at least listen to the music, but getting in the car instead of always having on an educational program, which I typically 99% of the time do, but sometimes just put on the music and play the music and sing along.
And
So,
how does
I
that
mean,
make you feel when you do that?
singing along to the song, it makes me feel free. It makes me feel like it's funny because over the past like year and a half, and a big part of my journey story is that I had a health issue that kind of came up in my life and hit me over the head. And it was really the impetus that drove me to start my podcast. And at the time that it happened, I had to make a lot of changes in my lifestyle. And one of the things that I cut out was alcohol. And I think that singing along to a song when you're by yourself and you don't even care and you're just really into it, it's the closest thing to feeling drunk, which is a feeling like I don't feel anymore. And even though I know it was not good for me and it was toxic and contributing to my health problems, I still miss that feeling of being a little tipsy. And I think singing along to a song like that, it gives me that. It's one of those things in life. And there are other things in life that do that too, that you have to realize there's not just one way to achieve those high feelings. There are other ways. And that's it for me. The singing along gives me that.
That's beautiful. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Whether you're having a tough day at work or you feel like having something sweet, I'm going to do the whole gamut of life,
Yeah.
right? Or you're going to scroll on social media because we're looking for that hit. We're not consciously saying to ourselves, I need a dopamine hit. Let me go scroll on social media. Or I need something. I'm going to have a drink or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But there are so many other things that give us that opportunity to feel that way. Are there any others that you can
Oh,
share
yeah.
with us?
There's tons. As a matter of fact, it's so funny you bring this up because I didn't mention to you, but I actually wrote a book about this. And it's called 52 Simple Things You Can Do to Boost Your Mood Instantly or something like that. And it's on Amazon. I wrote it back in 2018 because I wanted people to know there are simple things you can do to lift your mood instantly that don't really cost anything. And we get confused, I think, about the things that, that actually are fulfilling us and making us feel good. So like you mentioned going on social media. Yes, that gives you the dopamine hit, but it's a false high. And the same thing with alcohol. It's a false high. It's drugs, false high. They're all false highs. And the things that will be sustainable experiences and things that you do that really nourish you truly to the depths of your soul. Going on social media does not reach you at the soul level. And so you need to do the things that can reach you at the soul level. And oftentimes these are things like that you can just get lost in, like watching the sunrise, getting up early. If you've ever gone to the beach and you're either on the east or the west, depending, do the sunrise or the sunset. And it's absolutely soul nourishing. And if you allow yourself to sit there and just be in that, don't talk to anybody, just be in it, you'll get that same feeling. I did this recently on a trip to Florida, and you do it in the morning for the sunrise, and there were other people there, and nobody spoke. People just went to gather at that spot for the sunrise, and they just each experienced it in their own beautiful way. Things that are creative are also some people will say, I'm not a creative person, but there are things you do that are creative that you don't even realize. For me, I did a lot of work with flower photography. At one time, I was a fine art photographer. I did flower photography and portraits. And I can take my camera and one stem of a flower that I get at the grocery store, or even one that I cut in the field, and I take it outside. And just for half an hour or an hour, I sit with that flower and my camera and I look at it from every angle. And I go deep inside the flower and like things like that, where you can inspire awe in yourself for something, experience something, holding a baby, go to a farm and pet a baby pig, just silly things like this. Think of things that will inspire you to see the gloriousness of life. And these things are mostly free, sometimes maybe cost a little bit, but these things are available to us. And for some reason, maybe because they're so ordinary, we don't think of them as extraordinary. We're always looking for something that's like a quick high.
Mhm.
And life isn't like that. You have to do the work. If you don't earn it, you're not going to get the rewards. You have to earn that high.
Yeah.
You have to seek it out. You have to be in it. Bird watching is another, that's why people have bird feeders, because it's really feels great to watch the birds. And that brings me back to my childhood. When I was a little girl, we always had the book, the like Audubon Society book with all the birds. It was before the internet. So if you wanted to know what bird was what, you had to have this book. So my grandparents and my parents both had these books, and we had it by the window, and birds would come and you would look it up in the book. And I used to know all the sounds of the birds too. I used to know which birds were which by their sounds. And some of them I still know, not many, but just that kind of thing. It fills you up. Like, it's really interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
To interact in that way with life.
We had the same book, and then we also had the book with the bird sounds that you could play the recording.
Yep. I used to get for my kids these stuffed animals, the different birds, and when you squeezed them, they would do the sound of that bird.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, I love it. We tapped into something here, maybe a little unexpected. I'm going to put it in the show notes, your book. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I'm going to go get it. Tell us a little bit about how that came to be.
It's funny because I wrote that book because I wanted the experience of writing a book, and I self-published it. I wanted to learn about self-publishing. And so the best way to learn how to do something is to do it. So that's what I did. And because I was a professor, I taught writing. I knew how to write. This is not a heavy book. It's very light. It's just quick hits on these 52 things. So you could do one thing a week was the idea. And it's just basically me going through the process of writing a book, learning how to self-publish, working with an editor to edit the book. I worked with an illustrator to help me with the cover. I worked with a photographer. And I think like in the process of doing these things too, another thing, this is a bit different, but it goes along with the business, because I'm really into also sharing things about business and like how I'm doing it and growing, because as an academic going into entrepreneurship, there's so many things you don't know, or even if you're coming from one part of life into business, I think people should be open and sharing. Like, it took me so long to learn certain things because people don't share openly enough. Anyway, hiring people to help you along the way is really essential. You don't have to do it all yourself, and you really can't. To do it well professionally, you do have to hire out. You have to hire people who have an expertise, and then you learn about it. Then maybe the next time you can do it yourself, but you don't have to. And everyone's trying to get things for free. My point is that you have to put in the energy, and that might be financial energy. It might be paying for something to get the energy out, to get the reward out. It's like an exchange, a flow. So you participate in that flow when you're doing that. And so, yeah, writing the book was just really about learning how to do that. And I wanted to have that experience. It wasn't a big deal. Like, I didn't have a big fanfare. I am planning to write a book in the future that will be that kind of book that will come out, and there'll be a big launch and all of that. And I think the experience of doing this smaller one has helped me to see what that's like. And now I know people who are bigger names in the world who have published books, and I can see the process that they went through, and I can learn from them. And so putting yourself into a world, like we talked about that, changing worlds. If there's a world you want to be a part of, put yourself in it. If you want to be a writer, then write. And if you want to know what it's like to publish a book, then write a book. And you have to do it first. There's no one that you're going to call to say, okay, if you write this book, I'm going to give you this. You don't, it's not that way. It's the other way around. You have to do it first. It's an interesting process. And the self-publishing world is just, it's very easy when you learn how to do it. You can self-publish a book. I think the publishing industry is very interesting, and it's difficult to get an agent and to be published by one of the big publishing houses. It's not impossible. And then there are others that there are small publishing houses that you can pay to have your book published if you want, or you can publish it yourself for nothing, for basically nothing. You might need some help, but it doesn't cost a lot. And you can do it all yourself if you want. So anyway, I wanted to have that experience. And so I did it.
I love that. I too wanted that experience. So I actually did something a little bit different where I joined a group and we co-authored a book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another way to go. There's a lot of, I think that's a beautiful way to go, to be a part of an anthology. So if you want, and there are people who do, I've actually thought about putting together an anthology. I haven't done it yet, but I love the idea of it. And it's on my list of ideas. I always have that's another thing. Since I've changed my world, the ideas are just busting out of me. You'll find once you get involved in things that they lead to other things. And it's fulfilling. Like, it just makes you do more than you ever thought you could do, have more ideas than you ever thought you could have. And it's just like a snowball effect.
Absolutely. Agree 100%. Over 30 years of my own career, don't think there were more than, maybe making this up, 20 days that I wanted to jump out of bed and start working. Every day since I've been an entrepreneur, I cannot wait to jump out of bed and start doing whatever that day is bringing. It's so exciting. So many ideas, so meeting new people, all the things. And it feels really good. To make it simple, it feels really good. And I think you and I are similar in the fact that connecting with other humans. And I still do a little bit of an issue, I'll say, with the phrase like-minded. And I know what people mean by like-minded, and I get it. I totally get that. And they don't mean, but I don't want like-minded. I want different. I want to learn from different people and get different people together talking. But I get the sentiment.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. When I think about like-minded, that phrase like-minded, I think of it as people who also are oriented toward growth.
Exactly.
And they could have very different perspectives on various things. And that's great with me. I love try and change my mind about something. I love getting into debates with people, or I don't even call them debates, more like conversations. Some people don't like that. They find it uncomfortable, but in a positive way. Talk about things in a positive way. And you don't need to shy away from that when you're respectful and you can have an exchange. I'm always learning from people who are different from me. I love when someone comes in with something that gives me a perspective I haven't considered. And I'm thinking, oh, that's great. I'm going to go and do more research on that. Or maybe I'll change my mind about how I thought about that.
Exactly.
I think it's exciting. The mind is exciting.
Because
you're changing your mind. Think about the phrase, changing your mind. You're changing your mind.
I know.
It's growing. It's expanding. That's an amazing thing.
It is an amazing thing. And you have the power to do that. Nobody else has that over you. You can make that decision. It's the famous saying, it's one decision away.
That's right.
And along with that same thought is failure. I like to use the word failure. I like to embrace it, the shying away or reframing it. I try to uncover, not put failure under the rug, say, this was a fit for me, speaking for me, this was a failure. And what am I learning from it? So I also love to embrace that. I love to embrace change, all of those things. And to say that all of that comes with entrepreneurship. So my question for you is, how can other women, people listening to this podcast, make a significant change and finally do something they've always dreamed of doing, but are afraid of the failure, all those things?
Take action. You've got to take a step. And everyone is afraid of failing at some level. Even if you're a person who embraces it, it doesn't feel particularly good if you fall on your face. But I always think of the failures as opportunities for growth. And I don't think there are any mistakes in life. And there will be people who will tell you you cannot succeed without failing. You have to fail. If you don't fail, you won't succeed. That's a way of thinking. And I tend to align with that because I think it's failure along the way is just showing you places that you need to make a shift. So if you start out by doing something like me, writing that book, The 52 Simple Things, I wrote that book. I'm sure I made lots of mistakes in the process of writing that book and things that I would do differently next time. And if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have learned those things. You can't learn if you don't have experiences. And so taking action is just having an experience. It's trying something out. And it's true psychologically that motivation comes after action. So if you think about it like this, if you had to clean your room as a teenager, think of yourself as a teenager and your room is a disaster and your mom says you have to clean it. You don't want to. You're not motivated. But once you start cleaning the room, pick up a few items of clothing, you put them in the laundry, you organize your shelf, you make your bed. And after a while, you start looking around and you're like, wow, okay, my room looks pretty good. And you keep going. You're like, Mom, can we go down to Home Goods? I want to grab a new pillow to put on my bed today. And then you start decorating it. So then you start adding to it. That's how it works. Momentum happens after action. So you get started and then you start to feel good. And then you take more action. And then when something doesn't work, you can change. You can be agile. You can be flexible. So I think taking action, being flexible, keeping an open mind and orienting yourself toward a growth mindset. And a great book for this is Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. I think those are the keys when you want to follow your dreams. If you have a dream in your heart, in your mind, it is because you have a calling toward that dream. And it may not be exactly as you picture it. In fact, I had a great conversation with someone yesterday, and he said that he doesn't like vision boards. And I was curious. I said, why don't you like vision boards? And he said, because they give you a fixed view and they don't allow for possibility that things could be even better than what you imagine. And I really liked that. Mm-hmm. I still have visions. I still have things that I aspire to that are actual things. And I think that's also important. But you don't want to feel bad if you're not getting to that thing. If I have a mansion on my vision board that I want to live in and I don't get it and I start taking action toward it, but I'm still not getting that mansion, I'm going to start to feel discouraged if that's the only thing I'm focused on. So you got to focus on the process, focus on the action itself, focus on taking the steps, focus on the doing and the action. He said, focus on verbs, not nouns. And I thought that was great.
I love that.
Yeah, this was Michael Lopez. He's coming up on my show. And he's a great guy who deals with transformation and helps people with change and stuff. But anyway, I thought those were really good things. So yeah, taking action, doing, focusing on the doing, and letting go of the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned your show. Tell us more about your show and how it has evolved and how it has given you a perspective into entrepreneurship. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think having a podcast has expanded my view of the world in so many wonderful ways that I never dreamed even existed before I started the show. It's helped me to connect to people and then learn how to make more connections. So it's not just the connections that I got directly from getting into that world, but it's also the process of learning how to intentionally create connection in your life. Like we think someone's going to give me the connections. I'm just going to get them. And then that's about taking. And that's not the mindset. You want your mindset to be about exchange and flow and giving. And so I learned, how do I interact with the world and this new place of being a podcaster where I'm participating in that flow of connection. So I learned that that's a process you have to learn how to do. It's not like networking. It's not like it is networking, but it's more of it's if you could picture the network of like phone lines going around, picture your network of phone lines, like your AT&T phone lines. And it's like a back and forth. It's constantly flowing. I can picture like a little zap of energy flowing along the lines. That's how it is. So you have to learn how to do that, how to be that, and how to be in that world. So that was interesting to learn. And also the idea that even if you are speaking to someone who is further along than you, that you are also somehow at that level as well. Like you're able to elevate yourself to see that we're all like hovering around there. Sometimes I used to see myself as behind, or I would see myself as not at the same level. And I don't see myself that way anymore. I realize that we're all, and I think when you speak to people on a regular basis who are all over the map of with what they're doing in life and where they are and their level of quote success or not, you realize that you're there too. You're all there swimming in that same pond. Everybody's there. And it is a great equalizer. It's really an interesting way of looking at it to see that there's much more similarity between people than differences, and
I
that
find that really
we're all one.
interesting. Can you give us like a specific example? Like, I want to dive into that a little bit more. So you're saying like we're all equal, all in the same pond. And the reason I want to dive into it more is because I think a lot of the folks listening on the Wonder Boldly podcast, there might be a lot of the air quotes imposter syndrome, or
Mm-hmm.
what do I really have to offer? That type of thing. So I'm looking to you to share with us a little bit more about that. Like, how did you get to that point where you felt like, okay, we're all swimming in the same pond here?
I really arrived. I shouldn't say arrived. I'm in the. I don't think we arrive completely. I think it's ongoing, the process of this type of development. But I think for me, this speaks to a spiritual development as well, which happened to me as a part of doing the podcasting. I have, for whatever reason, it led me to tapping in more to spirituality. And maybe because I've talked to some people on the show who are very spiritual and just gotten involved in groups where people talk about spiritual things. I've always been a spiritual person, always. I started reading Deepak Chopra when I was in my early 20s, and I've always oriented toward that. But in becoming a mom and getting immersed in life and work over the years, it wasn't in the forefront, and now it's back in the forefront. So when you have a deep connection to your inner self, which I think is a part of the essence of spirituality, it's a connection to the inner self. And then through that, you connect to other things, call it the divine, whatever you want to call it. That happens when you are really open to experiencing the world from the standpoint of authenticity and a desire for true connection with others and with yourself. And that happened through being a podcaster. I know that maybe that sounds deep, but it really did. It really happened to me through this thing of podcasting. It sounds crazy, really, as it's coming out of my mouth, but it did allow me to enhance my spiritual development and then to see people in a different way. And then that will lead you to higher levels of confidence. And that is how you help to keep imposter syndrome at bay. I wouldn't say it's completely gone for me. There are definitely times when I still feel like an imposter, or I think I can't do that. But then I start doing it and I realize I can do it. You got to start doing it and you realize you can do it. If you want to run a marathon, you start running, and then pretty soon you'll be running miles. Like you can do it. You have to
Yeah.
look at also the evidence in your life of other things you've accomplished. There's always evidence in your life of things that you've done that you've thought you couldn't do and then you did. Always.
Hmm.
There's always something, even
Yeah,
if it's something small.
exactly.
So, yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know if that
Thank
answers it.
you. Yeah, no, it does. Thank you. As a podcast producer, I love that answer.
Podcasting is really an amazing thing, isn't it? It's so
Yeah.
amazing. And I know everybody I know who started a podcast around the same time I do feels the same thing. It's so weird. Because you start a podcast because you have something to say, or because you think there's something missing in the world that you want to highlight or you want to bring to light, you know? And so it is a personal development tool for yourself and for others. It's not just about talking online. It's about personal development.
Exactly.
Always, maybe almost everything is, really. Everything is.
Right.
If you want to look at it through that lens, anything can be.
Exactly. And that kind of leads us full circle to your episode this week with Kylie. She basically is saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And she's learning so much doing her podcast.
She is. And I think her podcast helped her at a time. She is the typical example of a kid going through the pandemic. And so the pandemic was really hard for everyone, and we still talk about it. And for her, it like interrupted her teenage years. And that's a really difficult time developmentally to have your life disrupted. And her answer to that was starting the podcast. And she has, I think, 2 or 3 podcasts now, and she has other things that she's doing. But for her to get into media helped her to deal with some of the difficult things that were happening in life. And she's just shining because of it. She loves it. It really made her come out of her shell.
I found that interesting when first in the episode just started listening, and you would imagine, or I imagined, that she was, I'll just use a phrase to be quick about it, but like an extrovert. And then she shares that, no, that's not. No. She was a shy kid. And it's really helped her for her. Like, not that there's anything introvert, extrovert, all good, but for her, she felt it really helped her.
Yeah. I think podcasting does that for people. It can show you a side of yourself that you want to develop that's there. And it's the way to do that. It's the way to bring forward the parts of yourself that maybe you're not comfortable bringing forward in any different part of your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Tell us how people can find you, and you have a very exciting event coming up.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Thank you. Yes, I am hosting a conference in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in September 6th, along with my partner, Renee V. And it is called the Rich Thinking Conference. It's all about unlocking the wealth of wisdom and tapping into your mindset to feel like you can accomplish anything, including all those things that are in your mind, all your dreams, all your visions. And so we've got a lineup of amazing speakers. People can see the lineup and the schedule for the day on richthinking.org. And you can also buy your tickets there. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on social media at Mitzi Ann Campbell on Instagram. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I have a link to all my things on my Instagram bio if anyone's interested in connecting with me. And also mitzicampbell.com is my website. I'd love to have you listen to the Blessons podcast for yourself. I have so many different kinds of guests, from doctors, regular people who've experienced tragedies, people who I had an angel medium on the show. I had Dr. Joe Vitale from The Secret on the show. I have all kinds of cool people, and I'm just loving talking to everyone, making connections and bringing those people to you. So I'd love for you to listen to my show as well.
Thank you so much for doing this beautiful work that you're doing and sharing with everyone, because like we've said throughout this interview, I think it's so important for us to share, for us to listen and learn and continue learning. And we can only do that by being around other human beings.
That's right.
I love it.
And being inspired. We inspire one another. We're mirrors for one another. That's what we are. When you walk out into that world and you see somebody, they're a mirror for you. And smile at somebody and they smile back. And think about the other things that people are mirroring for you, things that are maybe more important, maybe even things you don't want to look at. But we're here to learn. We're here to learn.
We're here to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Oh my God, it's been so good. This is a great conversation. I feel like we should just get coffee and talk like this all the time.
I do too. Thank you so much. That's it for this episode. Thank you again so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share it with a friend and leave a 5-star review. It means way more than you know. Until next time, continue to wonder boldly.